Hello, welcome to VETchat. I'm Anthony Chadwick from the Webinar Vet, and really pleased to have found another buddy on LinkedIn. There are so many interesting people on LinkedIn. If you're not on LinkedIn or not making an effort, it really is worthwhile because there are so many interesting people, and I find that when I chat, I learn so much. And obviously, the channel is about veterinary matters, but we're very interested in sustainability. How can we as a profession, how can we as an industry move quicker than we are doing? As vets, as a veterinary industry, we should be at the forefront of sustainability. And I was really interested when I spotted Mark on LinkedIn because Mark is a sustainability coach, somebody who helps people who are thinking about a career in sustainability, perhaps in another industry, how can they move across and become more involved in sustainability? Mark's based in America, originally from New York, now living just up north where they have a different currency, or they did once anyway. They were the 14th state up in Vermont. So, Mark, it's great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for giving us your time today.
My pleasure. And it was so nice to actually connect with you on LinkedIn and learn about what you're doing and how you're trying to have an impact with veterinarians on things near and dear and wide and far to their practice and their caring of animals.
And Mark, I think what is also really fascinating as a coach, you've also kind of lived it out because you've had career changes yourself. Probably a bit like me. I've stayed within the veterinary industry, but 14 years ago, I set up Webinar Vet, which at that time there was no digital training platforms. I think in the world, we were very much analog. And of course, the world has changed with COVID as well to become a much more digitally transformed world. But first of all, as a social worker, then as a market researcher, I'm now very much moving more and more into sustainability. But tell us a little bit about the background before we start talking more about coaching and more about sustainability as well.
Sure. Thank you for that. And I'm happy to share what my journey's been because many of the clients that I work with um, have talked or spoken with other career coaches who came out of a particular area of expertise, like human resources, um, or training or business analysis. And I've actually gone through the process of changing careers intentionally, and then jobs within that. So my interest when I was an undergraduate out in the University of Wisconsin, which is a land grant school and has a very big agriculture school within there, was in psychology, and that's why I was attracted to attending there to begin with, and double majored in psychology and social work, and was really interested in working with groups and individuals to improve the mental health outcomes for people so they had fuller, more enjoyable lives. Um, Part of this was probably influenced by the fact that my father was a psychotherapist in New York, had a PhD, saw patients in private practice, also in group therapy as well. Um, Sometimes I used to joke that when I was growing up, we had group therapy for dinner every night when we were all together, and maybe there's a little bit of truth in that. But there came a point in time where I realized and this was really a change in U.S. government. It was a time when the new president was coming in, and it was clear that the social safety net was going to be shot full of a lot of holes in terms of supporting the kind of work that someone with my educational career trajectory would be able to do. And I said, I like being able to take a vacation twice a year. I like being able to see a movie and have dinner out every now and again. And it was not headed in a good direction. So that really inspired me to take a look at other options. And I basically networked my way into a career in market research, which has been quite rewarding and really expanded my systems thinking in terms of how things work together and how things don't work together. So, across my second career in market research, new product development, strategy work, innovation, customer loyalty engagement, employee engagement, competitive analysis, I worked for advertising agencies, some of the largest ones in the world still are. I worked for a wireless communications company. I worked for automotive performance chemicals company. I worked for two different financial services company. And there was the occasional side hustle along the way, but I was seen as an industry expert. And it came a point in time where my dad, who had a large impact in my life, ended up passing. And one of his patients wrote me a note that really got me thinking about what my legacy and what my impact is going to be. And I decided that it wasn't going to be working for large organizations in a market research role anymore. So I um, officially asked to retire early and took a year off. And then I went back to graduate school to get a master's in sustainability management. Sustainability has always been important to me. In 2003, I purchased a Honda Civic Hybrid when there were only three hybrid cars in the entire world. And I trusted Honda because they're known as a superior engine manufacturer at a lower price point, but on par with Rolls Royce. And a couple of times that I lost use of my car for a week, it was because the software wasn't working well. It wasn't because there was any mechanical issues.
Hmm.
So, fast forward to having a newly minted master's in science degree in sustainability management a decade ago. I went out expecting to work for an employer with that degree. And what I ran into was a lot of age discrimination, even after I took 15, 18, 20 years off my resume. And that's where I opened the door to becoming an entrepreneur and using all of my skills and all of my wisdom to create impact in the world. And coaching was something that I got trained to do on my own about 20 years ago. And career coaching was the area that people started asking me for advice and can I pick your brain? And I put together some programs that have had major impacts for the clients that I worked with who've been able to pivot from a broad and diverse group of industries and educational backgrounds into a job that they're really excited about and feel like they can see how they're making a difference day in and day out.
Do you think in America, I mean, one, is it legal, but is there a ageist discrepancy? Are people actually discriminated against because of age?
Well, I don't think it's just America, Anthony. I think it's actually global. There's lots of surveys that are being done by one organization that advises and staffed by and advises Fortune 1000 companies. Um, you know, Ageism is an issue. I mean, if you look at our advertising, it's all geared toward generations that are younger than you and I. Even
Yeah.
though the people who are making business decisions look at the current election and the upheaval that's occurred in the U.S. in the past 6 weeks. You
Yeah.
had, two choices that many people thought neither one of them is young enough and fit enough to do right by where the country's going, and one basically put country ahead of self, and now we have a very different race where there's a 20-year age difference between one candidate and the other candidate. But we saw it playing out in the U.S. elections, and that's just a reflection of what happens in the real
Mm.
world, whether we want to admit it or ignore it.
Yeah, no, sure. So a really interesting background there. We've obviously taken you to doing the sustainability qualification and then beginning to start coaching people. How are you finding it with your experience, obviously in America, but I know obviously your experience is broader than that across the world. Do you feel that sustainability and environmental stewardship is being taken seriously enough? What are some really good examples you've got of businesses and financial institutions who are really behind this? Because, of course, these are the sort of companies that we should be supporting, and ones that are less bothered about it. In the end, with big companies with governments, they're often quite populist. If a load of people move away from using their product for various ethical reasons, they will often then take steps to start um, changing their opinions, won't they?
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, I think there's really two levels of this. There's the financing part of this, like where's the money behind the mouth going,
Yeah,
and then there's also consumer sentiment. So if you look at a lot of the online businesses that have been emerging, especially during the COVID pandemic period, they all talk about sustainability. And actually, personally, bought a new couch seating arrangement from a company that manufactured the cushions and the materials surrounding the cushions from reused water bottles. Feels like material to me. So it's pretty amazing how far that
yeah,
technology's come, all the way through to the financing side, where don't just have corporations in business for profit, but you have something called a B Corp, which is available globally, where 15 to 20% of the company's profitability is actually geared toward employee well-being, community well-being. It isn't all about how much money you can make; it's about also having impact and being a good citizen or having a stellar social license to operate. In the U.S., Patagonia has been that ever since they started.
Yeah.
Danone North America is now a B Corp. So small and large. It's not a mass movement. It's been kind of evolving. But I really look to someone like Ellen MacArthur Foundation. I mean, she sailed around the world for 6 months and said, gee, there's an awful lot of rubbish in the sea. We need to do something about that. And went from circularity was on nobody's radar to it's a major movement. Michael Bloomberg, self-made billionaire, through his Bloomberg philanthropies, is helping city governments at his own cost, run better, run more efficiently, and take the environment into account on a much larger scale than before. You have groups that are training people who work in government on how do you deal with mitigation and adaptation in the face of climate change, rising sea levels, more air pollution, stronger storms. Um, at the end of the day, there's a lot of people and a lot of boats that are rowing really, really hard.
Hmm.
And if I use that metaphor, there's still a lot of larger waves that are coming over and swamping those boats, because I
Yeah.
don't think collectively on a global basis, we've really gotten clear um, about how to do this for common good of everyone as opposed to the common good of a particular business owner. And you
Or
even
a
and
nation.
yeah, and you even have some companies that do about faces. I mean, 5 years ago, Unilever was a poster child for how to run every aspect of a global consumer packaged goods company, fast moving consumer goods company, through a sustainability lens. You know, the guy who put all that together retired, handed off the reins, and 3 4 years later, they're starting to walk back a lot of that and just
Yeah.
focused on profitability. So I think the largest issue in terms of what companies are trying to grapple with is that there's a large piece of their carbon footprint that they don't have direct control over. They're called scope 3 emissions, the
Scope
people
three.
who
Yeah.
supply products to them. Some companies like Walmart are doing education and training so that people can, meet the standards. But at the end of the day, data quality and being able to have the right data to be able to guide and make better decisions and use resources in a way that leaves a lower footprint and still returns profitability in an organization. There's a lot of data standardization and data quality issues that companies who really care about this are pulling their hair out over.
Yeah.
And even companies that don't care that much but know they have to do it are just keep hiring and throwing more people in Excel spreadsheets at it.
Yeah. Having said that, we've got to the stage. I know I read Harvard Business Review, and very much now it makes sense to do it. So it's a financial sense, to put solar panels. I've had solar panels on my roof for the last 17, 18 years. I did it because it was the right thing to do. But now I'm getting a fantastic return because, of course, we've had the war in Ukraine. We've got all sorts of problems with energy resilience and so on. And yet, I don't see huge numbers of solar panels going up on the roofs around the houses where I live. So we've got to educate people. It now makes more sense. It's not just for the greenies, the tree huggers. It makes sense for people to do it. And yet, because it's different from what they've done, they expect to get their gas and electricity from their supplier rather than from the sun. It takes a long time to change. So this is, again, something that we almost need to coach en masse for people, that they start to see that it makes sense to do it.
Well, government can play a role. If you look at the explosive growth of the highway system in the United States, the interstate highway system, that was actually a reaction to the Cold War and being able to move massive amount of people and munitions from one part of the country to the other should an adversary launch a nuclear attack, and it actually unleashed incredible interstate commerce. And the U.S. government was the primary funder of that. Why aren't governments, and I think Germany has taken some steps in the right direction, but they're getting blowback for it. Why aren't governments investing heavily in basically making making solar required and paid for on every home where there's enough sunshine where it's cost
Yeah.
effective to do that. Why are people being asked to dig into their own pockets? And then you have the BS, to put it politely, of a state like Nevada that's basically saying, after people invested this and there was a change in outlook from political reasons, it's like, okay, you can't sell your excess energy back to the grid. And
No.
now you've been financially penalized for doing the right thing and
Yeah.
keeping your costs low. Now your costs just went up. So the assumptions are changing. So I think there could be a societal commitment to doing this. And I think if someone was going to look at an updated version of a movie called The Graduate that starred Dustin Hoffman, and he was told plastics was what he should be focused on getting into in 1969, I think now it's storage batteries,
Yeah.
because that's going to be the game changer, especially when it comes to renewables.
And it's amazing when you see somewhere like Nevada, which is obviously a very hot and sunny place, not wanting to be into solar power makes no sense. Particularly when you go across the border to Phoenix, Arizona, and I believe they've just hit the 100 days with temperatures over 100 Fahrenheit on every one of those days, which is a record that's never been seen before. I think it was in 83 or 93 they had 72 days like that. So the problem is obvious to most of us, isn't it?
The problem, I think, is very obvious, and you're even getting to the point where people, individuals in what are called in the U.S. red states, 5 or 10 years ago, were saying that climate change was a hoax. They're starting to see and experience storms in ways that they never experienced before. They remember when it was different.
Yeah.
I mean, we've in where I am in Vermont, we've had two summers in a row where there's been a lot of smoke from wildfires in Canada, which are happening
Yeah.
because the planet's heating up, and it's at the point where I've had someone comment to me that one of our local beef growers, I mean, someone who grows 16 or 18 head of cattle, to then feed a small population of people who want to purchase that, saying the food tastes different. And
Yeah.
and they didn't take much for them to make the connection that when you have a lot of smoke falling down on the grass that the cattle are eating, and even if they're grass fed and grass finished, it
Hmm.
impacts what they're digesting and what their body composition is, and how that translates to a food stock.
And of course, you then get people with breathing problems. I know New York and a lot of the major North American cities have had the fallout from the Canadian fires. The Canadian fires are, apocalyptical. They're bigger than has ever been seen. I believe last year about the acreage, the hectareage that went up is about half the size of the United Kingdom. So it's a massive area of forest. We know that forest fires happen all the time, but these have gone up to another level, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we were going to be honest and just say, you know, the temperature's too hot and Mother Earth is pissed off,
Yeah.
because you see, the fires that we've seen, the wildfires that we've seen in Europe, which are really having a huge impact on the tourism industry, which a lot of countries rely on for their economic engine. Um, it's shifting when people are traveling and how people are traveling. I mean,
Hmm.
it was accelerated through the pandemic, I think, because people were onto revenge travel and they could work from anywhere. But now, the time when kids are out of school and people want to go in the summertime, it's like it's getting literally too hot to be in some of the places that people want to go to.
Hmm. Do you think, just moving back to government, obviously America a couple of years ago brought in the Inflation Reduction Act. We've got something kind of similar happening in Europe. UK, I don't think quite knows where it wants to go at the moment. The previous Prime Minister was not green at all. We'll wait and see what Sir Keir Starmer does. Um, how has that impacted, the IRA? Has that been a positive force for good, or again, can it be manipulated and abused a bit?
So I think the answer depends on your perspective. I think it's been amazing, and it's one of the things that I talk to my career pivot clients about. It's like, if you don't know where it is you want to apply your expertise, just read the summary of the Inflation Reduction Act, because there's a lot of money that's being put out there in industries that are either ramping up or don't exist yet. you
Yeah.
know, and they need help, and I think it's really really important. And I think that from a political point of view, the fact that the states that have been hardest hit by the move to offshore, you know, old line manufacturing jobs are the beneficiaries of a lot of the Inflation Reduction Act monies that are being spent. So I think that's good. But if you talk to someone who lives in a red state whose whole political career is vested on saying it's bad, then it's horrible and it's a waste of government taxpayer money. And we should lower
Mm.
taxes and cut corporate taxes because that's what's going to make America great again.
Yeah. It's hard to change people's opinions if they're very entrenched, isn't it?
I It's hard, but I mean, look, to me, this the single biggest behavior change experiment that I've witnessed in the past decade has been the introduction of what's referred to as Obamacare, but it's basically people not being denied health care coverage because they have a pre-existing condition, and there was and continues to be a lot of fight against doing it. But at this stage of the game, when you look at the opinion polls, people don't want their health care taken away, and people are enjoying a much better quality of life because of
Yeah.
that program. But it failed big time once under Clinton. It got through with a lot of trade-offs when there were two parties actually working on both sides of the issue during the Obama administration. And now it's like it's there, and it's like people may hear things that says that this is bad for you, but their lived experience is that this is good for me, and that's
Mm.
happened pretty much in a 10-year span.
Mark, obviously, I am a man of hope. So I believe this ship can be turned around because if it can't be turned around, we may as well all stay in our beds or eat, drink, and be merry because tomorrow we die. And in fact, we've had a psychiatrist who did a webinar for us, and they talked about a condition called solastalgia, which is this psychiatric condition now seen in humans, which says the earth is screwed. There really is no point in doing anything about it. So you can end up by saying, I'm just going to continue to live the life I've led because hopefully when the world finally does blow up, it'll be after I've died. What's your feeling? Are you still a man of hope in this? Can we turn this ship around, or are you a pessimistic?
Well, holding duality of the end of days along with we're going to figure this out is not easy, and sometimes disrupts a sleep cycle or two. I'm an optimist. I believe that I'm going to use kind of a weird example to illustrate this. But when you look at the extent of cybercrime, financial crime, you know, where people are swindling people out of their money on all sorts of different stories,
Yeah.
and the ingenuity and effort that goes into doing that, when you look at some of the server farms that are doing clicks for on social media for companies or disinformation campaigns, if 15% of all of that brain power were unleashed on all of the environmental issues facing us today, I think we would rapidly accelerate solutions that we can't envision and that could make a difference. I know that the science has told us and they've been telling us for 40 years that it's going to get as bad as it is now, and some scientists are saying it came even faster than they predicted. Um, but we're in I don't think there's a going back strategy. I think we need to build resilience organizationally and personally to adapt and mitigate to what's going to be different. I mean, whatever we remember about the summer that's behind us, that may be a great summer when you look back on 10 years, even if there
Yeah.
were things that, were not good compared to 20 years ago. So I think there is a lot of reason to be optimistic. And I think that people are, especially some of the billionaire class, like, I keep coming back to Mike Bloomberg or Bill Gates, are taking their money and putting it in places and creating change where change needs to happen that has benefits that spread far and wide beyond what the initial focus is.
Hmm. Mark, it's been great to speak to you. Great to connect on LinkedIn. a very useful platform for those people who perhaps aren't using it. And I always feel that I learn something on the podcast, which is great as a lifelong learner, and that's certainly been the case as well today. So, thank you so much for giving of your time and educating myself and hopefully many of the listeners.
Thank you. And for anyone who's in the midst or thinking about a career pivot, I am consistently put some tips in my LinkedIn post on a weekly basis. And you don't have to look at the new ones coming out. There's a lot of gold in the ones that are already there.
That's great. Those of you on LinkedIn, obviously, just look up Mark Wolf, and I'm sure you'll
Mark
find
D. Wolf. There's a few other Mark Wolfs out there. Middle initial D. Just look
Mark
for
D. Wolf.
just look for the sustainability career coach. There's only one of me.
Yeah. Mark, thank you once again. Thanks everyone for listening. Hopefully see you on a webinar or podcast very soon. Take care and have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.